You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo or honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker out there, you can try spicy ghost pepper, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. Listen, I'm going to dare you to do it. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs that you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and then grab a few more napkins and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's.
And welcome back to another episode of the California Golden Bearcast, a proud partner of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am one of your co-hosts, Rob. Andy is not here because this is a basketball edition. So, of course, I am joined by our basketball hive mind at Right for California, Don, Terence, Nick. How are you guys doing tonight?
Oh, getting excited for next week. Yeah. Looking forward to tip-off next week.
As we podcast, the beam is lit. Basketball is going great so far.
I'm going to the Warriors game tomorrow night, so looking forward to that too.
I'm going to spend the next week until we get I guess 6 days before our first game, learning the names of all of our new players. That's what I'm going to be doing. It's pretty confusing. I have 20 Post-its in front of me with various heights and last year's statistics, and it's all kind of a big question mark.
That's a good way of putting it.
Like everybody is 6'7", and they weren't on the team last year.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Well, there's a line. You've got we can get into this later, but there's a backcourt of Blackshear. Wilkinson's even undersized in the scheme of things. So yes, you've got your Petratus, Stojakovic, Joshua LaJoseph, and Omat, who are all in that 6'7" to 6'8" range, who will be their wings. But then you've also got a line with DJ Campbell, Jeremiah Wilkinson, and Jovan Blackshear, who are most likely your primary point guards, with Christian Tucker thrown in, who are definitely 6'1" or 6'2"-ish, if I'm being generous even with a couple of them. So I am worried that there's this line with some of the players that it's not fully going to be interchangeable at all the guard spots.
It's a good breakdown of the roster to kick us off. But how we're going to do this is kind of how we do the football stuff is I think we all brought in about 6 hot takes or any takes on the season. And then we're going to go around, share them, whether they be predictions or what you think of this team and so on. And then that'll be our predictions pod as we lead into the start of the second year of Mark Madsen and the first year of ACC basketball in California.
Pretty exciting stuff.
It is. All right, so
Mark Madsen's expecting another baby.
Yeah,
Mark
also
Madsen
true.
will be a dad sometime next week or two.
Exciting times.
I'm sure that won't affect his sleep or anything.
This is what, kid number 4, I believe. Is it 4?
Five? 4, correct?
It's 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
so
4.
He's on the right path to getting a starting 5 of children. So
he knows it's a boy, but trying to pry the starting lineup for week 1 versus the name of the boy, that was the challenge in talking to him this week.
All right. So for this predictions post, I'm going to go around in a circle clockwise on my screen. So I'll just kind of lead us in the conversation. So we'll start with Don, who is in quadrant 1 on my screen. Don, what is your first prediction take for the season?
Joshua Ola-Joseph will be the breakout star by the end of the year. Transfer coming in, junior transfer from Minnesota. He has I'm not saying he compares favorably to Jalen Tyson in body type, in athleticism, in playing longer than his 6'7" frame indicates, and explosiveness. I'm not saying he's going to turn into a first-round NBA draft prospect, but the build and the body is very reminiscent of Tyson. I think he's got an explosive factor that the other players, Stojakovic, Petraeus, the other higher profile incoming players don't have. If you look at the film on him, he averaged about 14 to 15 minutes a game for Minnesota last 2 years. Put up decent stats in those times, but he's just got the it factor. I loved today at the media session when the quote was, "What do we expect to see from you at game one?" And he said something to the effect of, "I want to do a roundhouse windmill dunk on a breakaway." He's confident.
Just to add to Don's just a little bit of flavor, he averaged 7.5 points per game last year at Minnesota. But the really exciting stuff, he played pretty limited minutes, only about 15, 16 minutes a game,
Yep.
as Don said. But he shot 60% from the field and 40% from three, which, pretty exciting stuff. He wasn't a high volume shooter, but it feels like he was able to use his athleticism to frame himself for shots. Shooting 60% and 40% from downtown as a small forward is pretty exciting stuff.
I think he's a little under the radar too. Does the three higher profiles of Manny Sissoko from Michigan State, Stojakovic obviously from Stanford, and then Rytis Petraeus coming from Air Force. Those are kind of the ones that people I think are looking at way more than DeJuan Campbell coming in from Western Carolina and JOJ Joshua Olajoseph coming in from Minnesota. So I think he's minorly under the radar a little bit, but I expect by the end of the year he will be the biggest threat that people will need to scheme in defense against.
Okay. Great way to start us off. A breakout player for the season. Nick, you're next up on my screen. What do you got for me?
All right. My predictions are probably going to be more like team big picture focused, in part because I haven't really had a ton of time to like break down tape or like look at what we might get from individual players. So we're going to start with a lukewarm take, which is by the end of the year, Cal will be top 100 in all of the various advanced stat metrics like KenPom, Torvik, so on and so forth, which may not seem like a super bold projection, but Cal starts the year 135th in KenPom, and I probably don't need to tell you that Cal was not top 100 since the last year under Konzo Martin. And we haven't really gotten particularly close to cracking into the top 100. I think that there's enough talent and depth here that I get why the projection systems aren't that high on Cal because, we've been real bad for like 7 years. I'm happy with what Madsen did last year, but let's not pretend that like it was in fact an amazing team. I think this year we crack into the top 100. And I don't think it's really going to be that close.
That's a good statistics take because that means that's a significant jump up from our last like 6 seasons.
Right.
Yeah, three Fox and three
3 White King, 2 White King.
Yeah.
So yeah, or four Fox.
Four Fox.
Four Fox
Yeah.
and 2 White
Mark
King.
Fox.
Yeah.
6 years.
Okay. All right.
I think that tracks. I think that tracks too, Nick, just because of the trajectory. Last year, return to competence and letting Madsen kind of learn a little bit, right, with what do you do with a totally new roster. Hopefully, this year will be slightly less growing pains, though I think there will be some. But then just the upward trajectory of maybe of true breakouts a year, maybe 2 years away still, and that's okay, right? So if you're lukewarm take 100 this year, I won't ask it for this podcast, but later on, what would be your goals for next year?
All right, Terence, you're next up on my screen. What you got for me?
Well, I think it's less a firm prediction and more just sort of an idea of what we're going to look like as a team that's going to be different than last year. Don, before we started recording, had talked about Madsen going maybe 10, 11 deep, at least through the non-conference schedule. And like I said, I have a bunch of post-its out here, and we have, 9 or 10 players who transferred in from both mid-major and high-major programs who average between 7 and 15 points per game. I think last year, one of the both good and bad things about the way we were set up is that we knew at the end of the game we were going to Jalen Tyson, or Cone, and that made us pretty predictable. But here we have a big sort of swath of players that, I'm wondering, are we just going to go with the hot hand who's playing defense particularly well on that night and not have, at least to start, a set finishing group and just sort of seeing who's playing well? And that might make us less guardable and more unpredictable early on until we kind of settle into who our better players are.
I think that's a solid take. I think it makes sense with this roster. It makes sense with, much like the football team, just the sheer number of new faces you brought in. So,
Yeah.
makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of more situational transitions. Like, for instance, Lou Dort as a true defensive, forward center on defensive sets and like literally half court and timeout at dead balls, and then B.J. Omat coming in playing that stretch 4 or 5 on the offensive side of the court. This type of depth gives you the ability to sub in your defensive specialists as necessary, and then quickly sub out and get your offensive specialists in on the other end.
Yeah, and then just speaking about the big person center power forward rotation. One of the issues we had last year is we just didn't have very much depth, and now it looks like besides Dort and Omat, who you mentioned, we have Mandy Cisco, we have returners Devin Curtis and Gus Larson. That's 5 guys that are over 6'9", that can play in the middle. And hopefully we can just sort of improve our rebounding from last year, because we had so many problems at the ends of games where we weren't able to corral a defensive rebound and gave up offensive rebounds until we lost on a game-winning shot, and that happened several times. Hopefully, now that we have a lot more depth in our front court, we'll at least take care or look to a solution to one of our problems that we had last year.
Cool.
All right. I'll give mine. My 6 are like, because I knew you guys would have the more analytical, like real basketball takes. I'm just gonna go with 6 fun ones that just are bucket list items for me for this season. So I'm gonna go with the first one. We see 3 former NBA players sitting courtside for us because we have ties to them on the roster.
You took one of mine away. Actually, that was my down list one.
we got Peja's kid Andrei Stojakovic. We got Starbury's son Stephon Marbury II, and we got Kiki Vandeweghe's nephew Hugh Vandeweghe on the team. So at some point, that's the goal, to see all 3 of them at Haas Pavilion courtside at some point.
It's a good call.
But
I think they're moving some star power. Right.
Maybe Shaq. Yeah. Yeah. So I haven't checked through everyone else. Maybe there are like some uncle or like distant cousin ties to NBA players, but those are the 3 that I know of. So
at ACC Media Days, Madsen was talking up with Carlos Boozer quite a bit of, hey, Carlos, you've got a big decision coming up with your kid, right? So you never know.
The Boozer twins are the number 1 and 2 recruits in the U.S. for their class, I believe.
I think they just committed to Duke last week. So
yeah, they did.
It's sadly not happening here. But
Real creative guys.
But that's my first one. All right, we go back to Don. Give me another one, Don.
So in my write-up I did for the website, I said for Right for Cal, I put Omat on the bench. I might be wrong on that as coming on the starter. 6'8", 6'9", has the handles, has the touch, has the footwork. Might be the player, Rob, you said it well, that we always wanted Kwani to be. Just that kind of combo, inside, outside, stretch forward, but can go inside when he needs to as well. Omat might be that guy. I'm holding on a little bit of skepticism because I don't think that transition from the Summit League into ACC play is going to be as smooth as some people are expecting it potentially to be. Yes, he was all world on Summit League, but again, it's a different world. So I want to see a little bit first, but Omat has potentially the most upside, even outside of JOJ, Joshua Joseph on the team, if he can maintain that high level of play that he demonstrated at a lower level. And talking to some of the players this week, I always ask who's the most unguardable person in practice, and it's always BJ Omat. He might become that unicorn player of 6'9" who can do it all.
So Don, I think the question is if you're going to, what is your starting lineup position of prediction? Because it feels like we have three guys at that 6'7", 6'8" height range with JOJ, Stojakovic, and Omat, all in that same sort of range. And if we start those three across the front line, that leaves us without a true big man, or maybe we go. Does Stojakovic move to the backcourt as a big guard?
Yeah, I think you're going to probably have Blackshear at point, Stojakovic at off guard, Petraeus, and Joshua Joseph at 3 and 4, and then Sissoko at the 5, if you're going that way. Even Coach, I believe, talked today about going 4-guard lineups that way, with a lot of that being interchangeable.
Okay.
So I don't think you're going to have traditional big 4 or 5 in the front, unless you count. Petraeus has great rebounding numbers at Air Force. Those guys, they can all rebound, go in when they need to, and do the dirty work. But from a traditional big perspective, I think you're only going to see Sissoko at the beginning of the year. Could be wrong. Might be Omat in there as well, though he doesn't really play as an interior presence in that way. Again, he can go inside and out. But if I have to predict, it'd be Sissoko starting at your center spot and holding down that paint.
Okay.
All right, Nick, on to your second.
All right. My prediction is that Cal will go 7-4 in non-conference play. That will include one upset win over either Vanderbilt, USC, Missouri, or San Diego State, but also one upset loss to one of the small conference schools that Cal plays that you would expect them to beat, but probably they blow one because of all of these new guys learning how to play together. But I don't think it's going to be nearly as bad as the sort of early season chemistry issues that Cal faced last year. Though I guess that's all pending because we'll see how many guys are healthy and ready to play in game 1. We don't have any, to be clear, there's no news about guys getting hurt, but you never know until you see who rolls out for game 1.
Yeah, I mean, we also didn't have Tyson to start the season last year, and he ended up being our best player. So there's that added thing.
Kennedy missed a few games early on as well.
Yeah. Nick, I want to
2-5 start last year, right?
Yeah.
To that point, I'm hoping it's a better start after not a 2-5 with losses to St. Thomas of Minnesota or those, that tier. But that's fair. One upset loss, one upset win.
I want to ask, this is a quick fire question on the back of that. Out of conference teams that we play, what would be the worst one to lose to? What would be the worst loss in your opinion?
Mercyhurst.
That's what I was thinking.
Good call.
Is this
I don't even know what a
second
Mercyhurst
year
is.
in D1? I know. Let me double check that. I know that they made the transition very, very recently.
Northwestern
this
State?
is their first year in D1 basketball.
Nick is just being protective of Sac State and the Stingers.
I mean, Cal Poly's probably worse than Sac State. But they're in the argument. One of the reasons that Cal shouldn't lose to some of these small schools this year is because for the most part, the small schools are really bad small schools, sub 300 in the nation type schools. If Cal does fall in an upset, it would almost certainly be to either Air Force or Cornell, who are, competent teams.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
This episode is brought to you by Iams Pet Food. When you choose Iams dry dog or cat food, you can see a difference in your pet with your own eyes. Healthy energy in 5 days, healthy digestion in 10 days, and healthy skin and coat in just 25 days. Satisfaction for you and them. Guaranteed or your money back. Feed Iams dry dog or cat food and see a visible difference. Visit iams.com/difference to learn more.
All right.
And Dwight Tarwater's undergrad as well.
The Dwight Tarwater Legacy Classic.
Yeah.
All right, Terence, give me your second point.
Well, okay. I hate to contradict one of our fellow, West Coast media members, but in the ACC preseason poll, one of our colleagues at Stanford, although he is a Cal grad, predicted that Jeremiah Wilkinson will be the ACC newcomer of the year, and every other media member predicted, you know, presumptive number one pick Cooper Flagg as being the ACC newcomer of the year. And I will throw my pick in with the other ACC media members and also agree that Cooper Flagg should be the ACC newcomer of the year.
Really going out on a limb there and
Spitting
making a
fire
lot
into
of
the mic.
I mean, I don't know how many people have looked at the YouTube of, Flag playing against Team USA, but as a 17-year-old, he fit right in against LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and I think we can sort of use this as a lead into like the competition that we're going to face in the ACC, and I know that people have looked at obviously Duke and UNC as historical, traditional, and modern basketball powers. But I think looking at the rest of the league, it's a very top heavy. I don't know that we expect to compete with those two schools. But looking at the rest of the 17 schools, there isn't a lot of or there isn't as much, it's not a traditional, especially now with Tony Bennett leaving, there isn't a traditional third school in there that is going to be, at that same sort of level as Duke and UNC. I don't know if you guys have even taken a glance at the other ACC schools and how they're
Yeah.
returning.
I think they're projected to have 4 quote locks for the tournament. Those two, and then NC State and Wake.
Mm-hmm.
But it's you're right. There's a big middle class in there.
Okay, good take. All right. I had a prediction that was based on Terence and Nick's yell at cloud take that they've wanted all of last year, which was the all wing lineup. My take here is we see a redo of the 2005-2006 Villanova team, which was their 4-guard, 1-forward lineup of Alan Ray and Randy Foy and co, with Dante Cunningham as their big man in the middle at 6'7". So my prediction for that lineup is you got Wilkinson, you got Campbell, you got Blackshear, you got Stojakovic, and then you got Ola Joseph playing the 5. And you're running full spacing and just one guy in the middle that just makes basket cut after basket cut after basket cut.
I will say today, Mattson actually said if they go small lineup, JOJ can play the 5.
Ah!
Mm.
See? Oh, it's coming to fruition. It's happening. It's happening. It's probably my favorite like college lineup gimmick of all time. So I absolutely love if they would do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
So
I
so
love it.
the all. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
No, I'd love to see that too. Just the art
My
of constant motion and movement cutting through the lane. Yeah, exactly.
so my favorite non-Cal basketball team of all time was the 1989-1990 Illinois Flying Illini, which had like seven guys that were 6'7". And the reason they could play that is because you had guys like Kenny Norman and Marcus Liberty who could handle the ball. And so during the middle Quanzo era, I was always calling out for an all wing lineup because we had Jalen Brown, we had Jabari Bird, we had Ty Wallace, we had five, and we had five guys that were between 6'4" and 6'7", including one ball handler. And looking at this current lineup, the reason that's not your closing lineup. We're not the Warriors. We don't have a Draymond Green, but with the five wing lineup, as Rob said, you can do a lot of things. You could press, you can run a half court trap, and with a bunch of guys being able to interchange and run from the 3-point line to 3-point line, and having a guy cut through, you introduce a sort of a bit of dynamic, defense that can turn from defense into offense. And you can run that for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, where you run a high pressure trap and run and gun. Look for threes. If the three's not there, reset and rotate out. 5-out offense. And I think, Rob, you're right that there's an opportunity for you have like a bunch of guys who are between 6'4" and 6'8", and just sort of run a trapping defense to a 3-point bombing offense.
Every once in a while, I know what I'm talking about. This is one of those days. I feel like I know what I'm talking about. All right, Don, give me your third take for the season.
I think we need to temper our expectations on Jovan Blackshear at the point. I'm not sure if I have to word this as a prediction is, if you're expecting him to be all world, he will disappoint. Word out of camp early on is he is the best player, right? So he coming in out of all the transfers, if you look at his stats at Grand Canyon, he was all WAC, all world, absurd scoring numbers coming in with Grand Canyon. Injury for the last 2 years and a slow road to recovery from literally a debilitating leg injury. So he's back at full strength. He's got 1 year left as a grad transfer. And again, he's been the talk of the early camp, but it's a couple of reasons. This team is so balanced and has so much depth, you're not necessarily going to even be that focal point. I think that transition from a lower level, like I was talking about with Omat, to a higher level ACC is not as seamless as you are. Think about Cone a little bit last year, Northern Arizona coming in transfer, undersized shoot first guard. At times we criticized Cone for all of the great things he did. He pressed sometimes. I think there's a little bit of that potential factor with Blackshear if he's put into that position of being expected to lead, score, save the team, whatever you want to put it. So if we're expecting a shoot first point guard who will be a decent distributor and will have nights where he may be incendiary, that's great. But if we're expecting him to be the best player on the team, I don't know if we want that case of him being the best player on the team. And I don't think he's really going to be, I don't think he has that over the duration of a season. So I think from the prediction perspective, Blackshear will be a good to above average point guard, but I don't think he's going to be, let's say, an alpha dog, like potentially Petraeus, Stojakovic, JOJ, Omat might develop into for this team. But the talk on him is kind of he will be the alpha dog. I'm hoping not, for his sake and for the team's sake.
Well, I can follow that one up because my next prediction is arguably related to that, which is that my man from Lithuania, Rytis Petraeus, will lead the team in usage rating.
Yeah.
That's not to say that he will necessarily be Cal's best player or that his usage rating will be like way higher than some other players, because I do think that this is a pretty balanced lineup. One guy shouldn't need to carry a huge load like the way Tyson had to last year. But I think For one thing, Petritis may be Cal's most versatile player. He can score inside and out. He's a good passer, a good ball handler for his size. And secondarily, so amongst high usage players, he was like the only guy that Air Force had in a really brutally good Mountain West last year. And despite that, was able to play efficient basketball, even though he was the go-to guy. I think that's pretty transferable, like Mountain West to ACC compared to some of the other guys who are going to be making either big leaps in skill level conference-wise or maybe usage rating. I think Petritis is best positioned to make that transition, and I think he's going to be a big part, maybe the biggest part of Cal's new era.
Fair enough. All right, Terence, you got another one?
I think I think we're probably going to see, we've talked about this a little bit early on, but in the first 10 games, we might see four or five different starting lineups. I think just there's just too much, like, in terms of incoming talent, that we don't know how they're going to perform once they mesh together. And I think Coach Madsen's going to want to see not just how individual players play, but how players play together in groups of 2 and 3. So we may see a lot of sort of different lineups just to see how players ABC play together as a triangle. And obviously they're going to be working through this in practice, but practice is one thing and game time is another. But I've mentioned and Donna's mentioned that we legitimately have 11 or 12 rotation level players. We haven't even mentioned Vlad from who's injured all of last year, but gave us useful minutes as a point guard and sort of as a defensive demon in a couple of games. We barely mentioned Devin Curtis, who we thought had a lot of potential, but maybe as a freshman, had some experience, where he got boxed out or didn't or missed a rotation, but we saw a lot of talent. Gus Larson, the transfer, we saw how he played a lot of key minutes last year, and these are three guys that we haven't even talked very much about and what their roles might be as well. But I think as returners, it's just there's just so many players who we don't know how their talent level, coming from places like UTSA or Grand Canyon or Air Force or Minnesota, we don't know how those sort of equate. So I think, we're going to see, even through the first part of conference play, a lot of experimentation in how our rotation goes.
Interesting. I was looking at how many starting lineups Madsen has historically used as a head coach. He used 6 different starting lineups last year, but a lot of those were sort of injury shuffle related lineups early in the year, and he used the exact same starting lineup all through conference play.
Yep.
He now it's probably unfair to compare because I think his Utah Valley teams were pretty well established, but he used 4 different starting lineups his last year at Utah Valley. 4 different starting lineups his second to last. He likes to be stable with his lineups based on the historical data, but I also think it's fair to say that this year's team is so new and so much deeper than many of his other teams that it could be different this year. So that'll be something to watch.
So at ACC Media Days, he talked about, like, last year, one of the learning curves is he felt a lot of the people got overburdened and burnt out by the end of the season. Partial attrition from injuries and other factors. But I think early on he is going to play the large lineups, juggle the lineups, see what works. But I'm actually thinking by January into February, he wants a core group of 8. He said this last year preseason. He didn't say it this year preseason because he's got so many people. But last year preseason, he said he wants 8. He wants a core rotation of 8. I think you're going to see a ton of experimental lineups, see what works, what fits well. But I think the goal, barring injury, right, which forces you down to a lower number, is you're going to see a core rotation by the time we enter at least this mean stretch of conference play of 8 players, maybe 9. But a 5 solid rotation, and then 1 or 2 guard/forward swaps, big man swaps to get to that core group of 8. The question is, who does it come at the expense of? Because there are 11 players who are transfer in and are worthy of minutes.
It's a good question. It's definitely something to monitor too, because a lot of these guys are coming in here with the thought that they're going to have an opportunity to play right away, particularly the older guys. But I do like the roster composition, like going off this conversation, just because if you're gambling on a bunch of upperclassmen and grad transfers to keep the floor from falling out, but your ceiling guys are definitely the guys that are sophomores or juniors that you're kind of expecting either stay here for 1 year, maybe go to the league if they explode, or at least be here for 2 years. So you're kind of in a win-win situation. If one of those younger guys takes the role, then you have an experienced guy that you can call on if an injury happens. But if they don't, then you have a more experienced senior that is taking that spot, and then you can bring the younger guys along a lot slower. I feel like the roster comp, they've done a real good job. It reminds me of the football team too. They brought in a lot of guys that were freshmen or sophomore transfers to build off of for a couple years, instead of just purely bringing in a mercenary team to try and win in a single year, which it kind of felt like was last year, where Madsen was just trying to get his culture established and being like, I can win here with a team, and he kind of showed it. So yeah, this is going to be a very interesting narrative plot line to see like who pops off into that top 8 minutes rotation. Okay, I'll give my take. I got a hot one. Out of our 3 games into the state of North Carolina, we win 2.
Ooh.
So we play at UNC, and then we play at North Carolina State in January, I believe, and then in February we go to Duke, and then we go to Georgia Tech. So we don't play at Wake Forest. Wake Forest actually just comes here for a one-off in February. So my take is, out of those 3 games, NC State, North Carolina, Duke, we win 2. I won't say which 2. That's 2.
That's a bold prediction.
I know it's a bold prediction, but it's a preseason, so I'm allowed to go bold.
If you're a gambling man, you can make some money with that. For what it's worth, Torvik is the more optimistic prediction engine, and he gives us a 5% chance of winning at Duke, a 21% chance of winning at NC State, and an 8% chance at North Carolina.
Don't ever tell me the odds.
Rob, you need to hold out until we get a gambling sponsor.
Yeah, I know. This segment is brought to you by FanDuel.
Prize picks. More.
But that's my hot take. That's my hot take pick. I got one more in the chamber, but I'll save that for later. All right, Don, give me. We're on to the back half of the 6-pack. So give me number 4.
Rebounding is going to be the biggest place that you're going to see an improvement on the defensive side. There's been a focus, I know, in practice. Multiple guards have called out that they're getting pushed not just for scoring but for rebounding. Nick talked about the Petratus impact on that, who can play and fill up the stat sheets wherever you want. I think you're going to see the biggest single jump in our defensive rebounding numbers as a single marker of we're working harder at that end, and there's a focused effort to improve in it. So that's why the defense is going to be what the defense is. He will do probably his still switching back and forth between zone man-to-man. Soft traps at the half court slow it down a little bit, but I really want to see that defensive rebounding number jump, and I'm expecting it to happen.
Yeah, Don, you and I are sort of in concert with what we're the themes of each pick one by one, because I was also thinking about like what statistical hallmark we would maybe see improving this year, and the one that I had picked out was defensive 2-point percentage.
Okay.
That's been a hallmark that of Madsen's sort of defensive philosophy, like what he can produce throughout his tenure at Utah Valley, where it started out good and kept getting better every single year. His first year at Utah Valley, his team forced a shooting percentage of 47.2 and improved all the way to 42.8, sort of stepwise each year. It's always something that he seems to emphasize and succeed at creating. But Cal just really didn't have the depth and rim protection last year to sort of do that. And so, like, Cal was kind of mediocre. They gave up, teams shot about 50% on their twos. I think this year, with the addition of Dort and Sissoko specifically, but then generally just length and depth all up and down the lineup, that we produce a number somewhere closer to like 47% or lower. And particularly, like, I think we probably throttle a lot of those bad teams in the non-conference. So I'm looking at defensive 2-point percentage as something that Cal improves a lot this year versus last year.
I think
I like it.
building on that, I think building on that is, if we give up fewer offensive rebounds, because those are always given up in the vicinity of the basket, we're going to give up a lot fewer layups, which will bring down that percentage. And as much as we loved Fardas last year, he was not exactly a dynamic rebounder. He was a great rebounder in a phone booth, getting everything that's near him, but he couldn't rebound to the side. He didn't have a lot of lateral movement. And I think, just looking at all of our big guys, we are a lot more dynamic in being able to swallow rebounds, not only above our big men's heads, but going from side to side and being able to sort of end defensive possessions with a defensive rebound instead of forcing a bad shot and then giving up a layup. And so that will go to both Don and Nick's sort of predictions in that with more dynamic rebounding, then that shot percentage is going to come down.
All right, Terrence, you got a take?
Yeah, I have something more fun. Just because I was at USC last year, and we're playing down here again, although I will be out of the country when we play. Walk on Jaden Karapetian brought like 20 family
Yep.
members to that USC game. So I expect to see another 20 of his family members at the USC game. You could tell they were his family members because they all had the NIL jersey
Yeah.
of his. And there were like 20 of them. I saw them after the game and I was like, huh, who is Karapetian? And then I looked at the roster and he's one of our walk-ons. So, he's obviously from the Los Angeles area. He's from Woodland Hills. And I'd never seen one player bring that large a family group to a Cal game. And, he had his entire extended family here.
That's a good one. That's a
Good.
good one.
Yeah, although we won't have anything as fun as Jalen Cohn's sister singing the national anthem, which I think was a highlight last year.
That was good. Yeah.
That was a really good moment. A really cool moment. I did want, after we saw the video footage of Jalen Cohn, like with the guitar and singing country music, I hope that they would allow him to sing a country rendition of the national anthem at some point before a game, but that one never happened. All right, my take is we get a monster like dunk poster moment this season that is like the picture that we all look at when we think about this season. Like the last one I can think of is the Jaylen Brown, Ivan Rabb years, where Jaylen had the dunk on Oregon State and Ty Wallace that same season had the dunk against USC here at home. Like those were the two like really, really huge ones that I have seared into my brain. So I feel like we have the athleticism on this team to get at least one of those types. and
Did
it'll
Matt Bradley never get one?
Matt never had a poster. I thought he would at some point, but he never had one.
Well, like I said
Pour
earlier,
one out for
JOJ
Olaf
thinks he
Schaftenar.
wants one.
Yeah, on Shaftinar. Yep, that was the big one.
JOJ is Don's prediction for a big dunk.
I could
Well, he
see
wants it. He's already called it.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see it happening, and then it'll be a fight to the death of who gets to use that picture first on an article. Okay, that's mine. All right, Don, what is your second to last pick?
Andrei Stojakovic is a 2-year project. When I was on the Psychic Hoops podcast earlier, they're like, "So is Andre going pro this year?" And no. I think, and this is me totally conjecturing this, I think the expectation is for him to, with this deeper lineup, again, as we've talked about with other players, there's not going to be a stud on day one going forward. I think by the end of the 2025 season, into 26, that Andre has the potential to do it as much as anybody else, way more than most players on the roster. But I am viewing and watching Andre through a 2-year lens. So that means I'm tempering expectations a little bit, again, with the depth. He's not going to be a 21-point scorer a game. Last year, obviously, he was underutilized. I think it's going to take a little bit of time to flesh out his role. Is he a scorer? Is he a dish and kick distributor? Is he all of the above? So I am watching Andre with a 2-year lens to see, because he does have NBA potential, more so than most of the players in the league. I'm not trying to discredit anybody, but I think you look at the medium game with him. Not necessarily sticking around for 3 more years, but definitely, hopefully, sticking around for at least 1 more year, and with the view of testing the water, so to speak, after next season.
I agree with that one wholeheartedly. And I'll add that I think he is the biggest sort of swing piece for the season, which is to say, like, there's the biggest gap between his sort of recruiting ranking and ceiling versus the actual on-court production we've seen so far. And so, like, how much Cal exceeds expectations this year may well depend on the speed with which Mark Madsen and his coaching staff figure out how to unlock that talent and deploy it on the court. And if they can figure it out quickly, maybe we got a real interesting team here, but it wouldn't shock me if it takes some time to figure out his role on the court.
It's a good way of putting it.
Just to sort of quantify in terms of like what he was the number 23 recruit in the RSCI top 100 when he was a freshman. But at Stanford, he averaged 7.8 points per game, 3.4 rebounds a game. And this is, I think, the most disappointing in terms of like looking at who his father was. He was a 40% shooter from the field, shot 32% from 3-point range and 52% from the line. And I think we can all sort of, figure out that, he's obviously had NBA level training growing up, and those could just be a 1-year aberration. Obviously, he's got the shot form of his father, so I guess we hope that with less pressure and a little bit more spread out offense, we can see those shooting numbers come up to a standard that would sort of indicate a future pro.
If the answer turns out to be that, like, Jared Haas is a basketball terrorist, like, I would be willing to believe that theory.
I mean, there's a version of this too. Like, if you look at all the 5-star, high 5-star, low 5-star, high 4-star guys that Jared Haas has brought in, none of them who are highly touted freshmen had a great freshman year. I think the last one I can think of under Haas was probably Harrison Ingram. But, like, Zaire Williams was like a huge 5-star kid. Absolutely did nothing his freshman year. Andre, the same here. There's a couple I'm missing off the top of my head. But no one under Haas, even though they recruited those guys, had, the Zion Williamson or like, those types of like highly touted freshman type years
Right.
at Stanford.
There's a reason that man is unemployed right now, or at least not at Stanford. I have no idea if he's gotten a new job.
Yeah, you're gonna make me look that up, aren't you?
Yeah.
Just to sort of tie a bow on Rob's Jalen Cone sort of country music, he is playing for the South Bay Lakers right now. So he might team up with Bronny uh, this season.
He is in LA.
Obviously we don't
Well,
expect Bronny to
well,
stay with the parent team the whole season.
I would say that those two players are equally of deserving of NBA rotational minutes.
Now Bronny hit a 3 today, so
He's into the cone zone then.
that's right.
Right.
I just
Jared Haas
imagine
is still unemployed.
I just imagine Jalen or Bronny like dribbling up the ball, or Jalen dribbling up the ball. And they refuse to pass to each other because they know that both of them want to shoot the ball. It's just an absolute refusal to pass to one another because they know the moment the ball goes to the other guy's hands, it's not coming back their way. Love to see it. All right. Whose turn is it? Is it Terence? Is it your turn or is it mine?
Yeah. So it's not really a prediction, but I think, a guy that we haven't really talked about much is DJ Campbell, um, DeWine Campbell. 6'2" guard from Western Carolina, averaged 11.6 points per game last year. But the sort of things that stand out to me, he's a 52% shooter from the field, 41% from downtown, and had 29 steals. So that's slightly less than one a game. Um, I think he's another threat besides Blackshear and Christian Tucker to be into that backcourt rotation as well. Um, yeah, just because another mid majors player coming in, really good shooting numbers, decent size at 6'2", was able to score at a mid major level, 11 points a game. I just want to make sure that, it feels like, you know, there's sort of a cluster of three point guard size players competing, or four, I guess, with
Wilkinson.
Vlad competing for those sort of lead guard minutes, and it feels like, I know, like Adon said, Blackshears sort of had the more bit more touted, but it feels like they could be anyone's minutes depending on practice and performance in games.
I see him as a 3-and-D specialist. I just his defensive tenacity is off the charts. And you said the 3-point numbers. I don't know if he's going to get point guard minutes, but I totally see him as an off guard and a 3-and-D specialist. That's my view.
All right.
So like a Jawan Harris Dyson who can shoot.
Yeah, that's fair.
We would have loved a Jawan Harris Dyson who could shoot.
I was going to say, you have my attention. My eyebrows are raised.
All right. I have a spicy hot take here.
Uh-oh.
My spiciest hot take out of my list of hot takes. I don't know if there's an award for this in the ACC, but Jeremiah Wilkinson is the sixth man of the year in the conference.
Oh.
Ooh. Cite your sources. Keep on going.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I don't think the coaching staff raves about him. Everyone that I've talked to has raved about him. As I think the mantra of the staff is to bring the younger guys on slowly is their thing. But I think his talent is undeniable to the point where he plays himself into the rotation, but not to the point where he overtakes a guy to take. Because I think he's a point guard at the end of the day. He'll probably be if he stays here for another year, he's probably your starting point guard next year. But I don't think they're going to put that ball in the hands of a freshman to organize and run this offense for the majority of the game when you have so many experienced guys that can do that for you. So I think he becomes the sixth man and is your small ball off two, or if you need a jolt of offense, or if you're looking to push in transition where he has to make less decisions and it's more open court, less half court, because he is pretty dang athletic. That's the spot that I think they put him in, and he gets enough statistics to warrant a shot at a six-man award.
I can get behind
There
that.
is one. There is.
there is
I was
one?
gonna
Okay,
say,
great.
Award.
I just looked it up. It's been won by luminaries such as DeAndre Hunter, Scotty Barnes, and a bunch of Florida State guys, as it turns out. I think that he'll have to compete with the fact that Florida State loves using their bench in weird ways, because they've won it 4 straight years from 18-19 through 21-22. So, if Mark's willing to keep somebody on the bench but then give him major minutes, he might be able to sneak his way in there.
That's bad. Yeah, so good.
And last year's winner, Ishmael Leggett from Pittsburgh, started 14 games. So, the as for your statistics, it actually, they aren't rolling up big statistics. A lot of these guys are scoring between 4 points a game and 12 points a game, and the rebound and assist numbers are all pretty low. So it looks like they're looking a lot more like actual impact on the floor beyond just racking up numbers. So he doesn't even need to be a big scorer, rebounder, or assist guy. He can just have an actual impact on wins and losses, and that will, you know that can get the media members available to vote for him. And we already have a vote from the Stanford Rivals writer. So
So you're telling me that all Jeremiah has to do is step onto the court and just have a positive plus minus the entire
Pretty
season,
much.
right? That's pretty much what he needs to do. Okay.
well, I mean,
See?
he has to beat out the other ACC players.
He just
but
needs to have
yeah,
a higher plus minus than the rest of the ACC.
Yeah.
But see, now it's making it sound like my hot take wasn't that hot. Now it's like you guys are all like
Oh, it was
nodding and like
hot.
slight
It was hot.
agreement. It was hot. Okay. All right.
I will say, predicting any postseason award, I feel like almost by definition is hot in a league with how many 18 teams, because Notre Dame's in this conference in basketball.
Yeah.
Like, there's huge competition for all of these postseason award slots when your conference is basically 2 conferences.
All right,
I don't know.
Don.
I think
Oh, yeah.
Cooper
What do you got,
Flag
Terrence?
will make one.
Ooh,
I think Cooper Flag will make a postseason team.
that's a super
You
hot
think?
take. Super hot take.
Yeah.
My guess is he goes to the
So
NBA after 1 year.
So I think Madsen will get more technical fouls this year. This isn't really my prediction, but I think Madsen will get more technical fouls this year per capita than any other season he's ever coached. I think there's going to be a little bit more fire from him on the bench this year. Number one, but my real prediction is record. I'm expecting 18 wins, 18-13, 8-3 out of conference. Nick, you said 7-4. I'm saying 8-3. I'm thinking it goes pretty textbook. We beat everyone we're supposed to beat. We lose to the 3 that are probably toss-ups and or underdogs. Maybe there's one flip each way in there, but I'm expecting 8-3 in non-con and then 10-10 in conference. The ACC's top-heavy. You've got the 2 world beaters in Duke and North Carolina. NC State and Wake Forest are supposedly locks at this point too, if you believe some of the other write-ups. But again, there's a huge middle class and a very small bottom class with the Boston Colleges of the world. So I feel like the 10-10 is a reasonable, right in the middle for that. So 18-13 would put us squarely NIT, maybe fringe NC2A if some of the wins and RPI numbers fall into place. But overall, I think next year is the actual breakout year, and this year is, echoing Nick's comments at the beginning of we're top 100 across the board in some of the numbers and rankings. We are solidly in that NIT 70th to 100th best team in the country.
That seems reasonable.
I was also planning for my last prediction to take some guesses at the win-loss record. Your prediction of 10-10 got me looking at some past ACC seasons to try to get a sense of if a 500 record would even get us in NCAA consideration. And the quick answer is it would probably get us to the point where, like, in early February, we're paying attention to bracketology and we're like, oh, if we just upset Duke, then maybe we make it. But like 10-10 probably wouldn't be enough unless the rest of the conference really outperforms expectations in the non-conference portion. But it probably would get us into the NIT if we wanted to take it. My significantly less bold prediction was just that Cal would finish above 500 on the season, which, to be clear, is not what I don't know what Vegas has as a win-loss over-under for the team, but like the projection metrics do not predict a 500 record for Cal. And that's sort of, I am both predicting it and sort of marking it out as if we go above 500, that would qualify as I am happy with how this season went. That would be like, meeting a decent expectation. We wouldn't be like jumping for joy, but we'd be like, okay, that's solid progress, decent job cobbling together all of these pieces in one off season to make us a baseline level of competitive in the ACC and return us to above 500 basketball for the first time since Konzo.
Terence, are you looking up the Vegas line? Is that what you're typing?
I am trying to, but instead of that, I'm just going to say, you know what? 20 wins. We're going dancing. But I'm going to say we probably will have to pick up an ACC tournament win to get us there. But with a 18 team league, that first round game is no longer as difficult as it has been historically for us. So give me 20 wins, give me an NCAA berth, and who knows, that's all, matchups. So I'm not going to get into predicting any sort of depth into the NCAA. But I think now so for years we knew, especially not last year, but the year before, the Pac-12 has been a very difficult minefield, but it's never had the national perception of strength. But now, when you mention ACC, everyone knows it's one of the two premier basketball leagues, and so we're going to get a slight bump, whether it's computer rankings or coach perception, in that now we're competing in the ACC, even if teams forget that we're in the ACC. And I think that's going to be the edge that boosts us into fringe NCAA competition. And I think, the problems that we had last year, where when Jalen Tyson, his shoulder he was working off 1.5 shoulders and trying to carry us to the tournament. And it feels like, one of the things that we won't have as a weakness this year is depth. Truly, even though this is a cliche, truly we have a next man up style roster, where if we lose a player, no matter how talented, there's going to be somebody of at least a comparable level that will be able to fill that place. And I feel like, you know, obviously basketball games are, a season is a war of attrition, and especially with all the cross country travel. But we have the roster that's set up to combat those issues.
By the way,
So
you
last
mentioned
year,
the ACC tournament. Does folks know what the ACC tournament format is this year with the additional teams? I did look that up, so I can give you the brief description.
Please do.
I do not.
top 8 have a bye?
Yes, but it's a little more complicated than that. Seeds 5 through 8 receive a first round bye. Seeds 1 through 4 receive a double bye.
Wow.
That's right. So then you've got, because there's 20 teams, 18 teams. So then 9 through 18 play for 5 spots. And then they're joined by 5 through 8 Interesting. Is there a play-in game then at the bottom of that too, potentially? It's like 15 through 18 play each other to knock one or two of them out?
So I'm looking at, it's a 15-team bracket. So
Okay,
presumably
so they
the
only take
bottom
the
three
15.
are just gone.
Right. Okay. So last year we started 2-5, and including that start of 2-5, and we were 4-10 at one point before recovering to a reasonable 13-19. It was a season of streaks. So you had a 3-point loss to Montana State, where I still have nightmares about Brandon Walker just totally eating up Fardal Zamac. You had a 3-point loss to UTEP. You had a 3-point loss to Tulane. All those three in a row, and then a overtime loss to San Diego State that got away as well. Again, led into the 2-5 start. To me, I would be on the board of being 20 wins is attainable if we're literally 7-0, because that means that coaching staff has learned to adapt a little bit. The team is quicker to work together. But I'm just looking for not starting off 2-5 again with 3 or 4 heartbreak losses and WTF moments, like the Pacific game where suddenly Pacific looked like they were a team of Steph Curry's against Cal.
Maybe that's the line that gets us there.
And then we ended the season with 4 straight losses, too. I don't even want to relive the Stanford loss in the Pac-12 tournament. But remember, we were kind of like, oh, we might actually be able to play our way into potentially NIT or top 4. Top 4 was in discussion for a while, just because the way that the conference played out. And what did we do? We went and lost badly on national TV to Colorado, lost horribly on national TV to Utah, lost at Stanford pretty badly, and then we got our hearts ripped out against Stanford again in Vegas. So as a coaching team learned to adapt, and as a team ready to adapt with so many new faces.
I had just about
Sorry, Rob, didn't mean to bring it up.
I had just about forgotten that Vegas Stanford game. Just about forgotten it. It was right there. It was on the cusp of it evaporating, and then you brought it back. So now I have PTSD. I'll give my last take, and then we can give some closing remarks. But my last take, I think we got 7 guys on the roster that get close to, that are at or close to double-digit scoring. And by close, I mean like, they could be at like 9.4 or something like that, and we'll just round up and say that they're at 10. But yeah, somewhere.
I'll even give them 8.5.
Yeah. So somewhere around that, I think we get about 7 guys that do that for us consistently. Not as hot as my previous 2 takes, but it's a statistical one. But
does that fall in with Madsen's preferred pace of play? Or Don, I don't know if he's talked about sort of what he wants to do in terms of offense philosophy this year.
Nah,
Because
I
last
haven't
year,
seen it. Yeah. He guards that really closely until you see it in real time.
makes sense. He's kind of like Wilcox in that regard. Doesn't want to give up anything so that anyone gets an advantage.
I can't remember who I was talking to today, but someone said like you could see Petraeus be the top average scorer for the season per game, but then never actually lead any single game in individual scoring.
Steady Eddie at like sense. 10 points every game, but
Petraeus is 14 points a game, but every game there's somebody who goes off for 20 to 25.
I could see it. All right, so to close out, just because we have been recording for a little bit over an hour, just I want your guys' closing thoughts on the season. What, in your regard, to leave it on a little bit of an optimistic high note, what in your regard would be a successful first season in the ACC/second season for Madsen? And I'll start with you, Don.
Just the 10-10, showing you're competent. There's probably some upsets in there in both ways, but showing that maybe we knock off, to your point earlier, 2 out of 3 in North Carolina. I think this whole ACC transition has gone better than any of us maybe could have thought as far as just exposure. And obviously the Calgorithm played in the football side of it quite heavily, but just actually being on the radar across the nation. So I'd like to go in and see. I'd love 2 out of 3 in North Carolina because that would definitely raise the visibility on a national level. But it's a success for me. We just 10-10, like I had predicted, just because that means you're competent. You probably pull off a big name upset somewhere in there to get to that 10-10, and you're on people's radar. And Madsen continues demonstrating that he can run a destination program.
Yeah, it's funny. I had just talked about how, like, sort of my goal for the season is just to be over 500, and ultimately, you know, it's a bottom line win-loss sport, and so it's hard not to say, you know, like a certain number of wins is what you expect. Having said that, like, I'm trying to expand my focus to like what I see on the court outside of wins and losses for this 1 year, because for the first time in forever, Cal has a younger roster that you can expect should stick around for a little bit for the most part. So like Sissoko and Blackshear are the only guys on the roster, to my knowledge, who are going to be out of eligibility in terms of scholarship players. Most of the guys are, you know, just transferred in, and obviously this is the era of player movement, so there's no guarantee. But I don't think that we're gonna see a huge exodus of guys leaving with eligibility left. Knock on wood. Which is to say that this is a rare, like, I don't want to say rebuilding, but like, this is a year to see what you have, who is a long-term piece, who can grow into a role, how do you fit them together, who's going to be around for next year, what do we need to add to the roster next year to augment things. And I'm just really excited to have fun and not worry a ton about wins and losses, and just to find out what all these players can do and how they can fit together. And I really feel like this is going to be a really nice combination of high fun, low stress basketball.
Good way of putting it.
And I say that now, even though I know that, like, in a matter of weeks, Cal will be down 3 points with 4 minutes left, and I will be freaking out.
Rip your shirt.
But I'm setting my serenity goal now, even if I fail to hit it.
Terrence?
I will consider the season a success if we don't lose 3 games in 3 days on last second shots in a row in San Juan Capistrano.
Sorry to drag that memory up for you.
The Swallows may
Just 'cause
return, but we will not.
we drove like an hour down there, me and Ray. Actually, no, I think sort of looking at the bigger picture is sort of um, just after 6 years of darkness and 1 year of half returned last season, um, like getting to see competent basketball, a identity that we know, who we're going to be. Obviously, Madsen hasn't told us what he's looking for, but I think obviously defense first, hard nosed. His style of play is probably where we're going to take our identity from, and being able to see that executed on the court. Um, Obviously, wins and losses do matter, but the bigger picture of a competent basketball team once again wearing the blue and gold uh, will go a long way in determining success in terms of process over results, and just being able to see, like, you know being not having to turn on Cal basketball out of obligation, but instead look forward to a game is what I'm really looking forward to, especially after last year.
All right. I think those are solids. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining. Men's basketball season starts on Monday, November 4th.
Yep.
Oh, good. I got the date right. So November 4th, 8:30 p.m. against Cal State Bakersfield. The first of, I think 3 or 4 8 p.m. games we have this season, but it is the first one. Yeah, I'm
it's
excited.
a doubleheader with the women's game. So
Yeah, the women I think play ahead of the men that night. So I think if you get the men's basketball ticket, it gives you access, I think, to the women's game. I'm not sure if I read that properly, but that might be the case. So take a look if you're interested in coming out to Haas on a Monday to watch the men's basketball. Do that, or else you can watch it at home on the ACC Network Extra, which is on the ESPN app. And ESPN, I don't think it's ESPN
National
Plus, but
TV.
soon to be national
National
TV.
streaming.
Yeah, we'll be on for Vanderbilt on the SEC network in a couple weeks too. So
and then SC for Big Ten Network. Exactly.
so weird to me. So weird to me. All right, but thanks, gentlemen. Thank you for the time. Have a great rest of your evening, and as always, go Bears.
Go Bears.
Go Bears.
Go Bears.